Picture a champion who can heal off his abilities, a champion who gains permanent max health by landing said abilities, a champion with a low cooldown poke that doubles as a wave clear tool, a champion with a near global range attack that can serve as either a scouting or assist tool, a champion with an ultimate that can theoretically last forever and deals damage to all targets around him while healing him in the process. Sounds really appealing, doesn't it? I just described Swain, someone everyone has likely run into once or twice every so often, but that's just it. One would think someone that versatile would be more frequently seen than just once or twice every so often, and yet of the battle mages, Swain doesn't really show up as much as you'd expect. What's interesting is that despite being technically viable in 4 different roles, you'd be hard-pressed to say he's a stable pick in any of them, implying he has no role. Swain's been a Nebulous cast member ever since he got reworked back in Season 8, and while visually he looks a lot more imposing than his old cripple look beforehand, beyond a major blip in 2016 and his VGU, his tenure thus far has not been too great, getting even more sparse the higher up you go. While down in the depths of bottom elo, you're likely to find him appear a bit more often, with this series mostly focusing on Diamond Plus. I've had my eye on Swain for quite some time, so for today we'll be discussing why no one plays Swain, despite his kit being very appealing on paper. By the way, I'm not sure when you'll see this, but at the time of writing this, early August, there have been talks on Swain getting reworked again. My gut tells me it's going to come out in 14.17, but in the event it ships earlier, please keep in mind when watching the video that most of what I'm saying pertains to Swain prior to his 3rd rework. Yeah, this guy got changed 3 times following his VGU. He's quickly becoming the next rise. Continuing on though, being one of my most viewed rework retrospective episodes, most of you should know how I feel about Swain. On one hand, again, I like how he looks now visually, and I do find his new gameplay to be more, I guess, interactive compared to his old version of just throwing stuff at you to poke you down with, but on the other, there was a unique charm to his old playstyle that, despite being one-dimensional, made you really think about what you had to do to exert the most impact in fights, considering how positionally dependent his pressure was. For the most part, that premise still holds true now. Swain's abilities heavily punish you from his positioning and force you to be very aware of how far his threat range is. Such is the case for most battle mages. What they lack in range and front-loaded damage compared to artillery and burst mages, they make up for by having DPS on par with marksmen and skirmishers. Swain is no exception, having some of the best uptime in AoE pressure even among his peers. Though I briefly paraphrased this kit during the intro segment, let's go a bit more in detail on his core gameplay aspects, because that's where his central problem is located. Swain has 2 modes, neutral and all-in. His neutral mode consists primarily of pushing waves quickly and fishing for opportunities to accumulate soul fragments. The 2 ways he can do so are through Never Move and Vision of Empire. By landing his root, he can effectively guarantee 2 soul fragments per enemy champion by yanking his targets into the explosion. By doing so, Swain can recover a small chunk of health and permanently gain bonus health. That is about as convoluted as it gets. Aside from that, Death's Hand is your garden variety damaging ability, albeit with a fairly decent range and fantastic AoE to go along with a short cooldown. With just 1 item, you can shove lane with this guy no problem. The all-in mode comes in the form of his ultimate, Demonic Ascension. This is one of only 3 quote-unquote infinite duration abilities in the game alongside Briar and Olaf's ultimates. On activation, Swain creates a massive damaging aura, draining the health of all targets around him. Additionally, he gains a resource that continuously depletes, functionally serving as the remaining duration of his ultimate. Thing is, so long as an enemy champion is taking damage from his ultimate, Demonic Ascension will never wear off, allowing him to theoretically sustain it forever. As an added bonus, Never Move's base cooldown drops from 10 seconds to 8, letting you spam it more often while in this form, an extremely powerful ability that sports equal parts damage and sustain. When activated, especially in the middle of the enemy team, Swain can become deceptively tanky from all the lifesteal with the continuous damage and added burst accompanied by Demon Flare. Individually, Swain's abilities are exceptionally good. Death's Hand is one of the most consistent poke and shoving tools in the game that's very hard to avoid if you're in range due to how fast it is. Vision of the Empire is akin to a damaging Vars side alteration. With a max target range of 7500, it's effectively global. You can use it to check rushes at a safe distance, check to see if the enemy team is attempting Baron or Dragon behind your back. You can use it to assist your team remotely as either a zoning tool or follow-up attack tool. It has a ton of use cases. Never Move isn't the best crowd control skill in the game, but it's a very unique one in that unlike other typical routes where you want to stand behind something to avoid getting hit by it, for Swain you want to stand in front of something so the thing behind you gets hit by the root instead. If Swain's abilities are all really strong in a vacuum, why is he unpopular to play? For one simple reason, his 2 playstyles contradict themselves. Superficially, Swain's abilities can be used in tandem with each other to great effect. Death's Hand spreads out in a cone, but each individual bolt can damage the same target. So in a similar fashion to Graves' auto attacks, you get more damage by firing at your opponent from point blank. This pairs nicely with Demonic Ascension's whole motif of wanting the enemy team to stay within range of his ultimate. Furthermore, you can still employ the EW combo, but in practice, his neutral and all-in playstyles are not nearly as cohesive as other champions. Swain's basic abilities are meant for control and harass, just like his old kit was. He excels at pushing waves quickly while landing chip damage with this combo, but his ultimate achieves the most value by being in dead center of the teamfight, so while half his kit works best when attacking from afar, the other half works best when attacking from up close, and by trying to prioritize one, you lose efficiency or consistency in the other. To elaborate, Swain's Never Move only obtains a root property on the way back, and like most boomerang abilities, the best range to throw at them is at the very far end of it, where the opponent will take the outward and inward damage in quick succession of each other. RA, Sivir, Echo Q all have this property. It's much easier to land both hits when tagging the enemy champion at max distance because it gives them less time to avoid the return trip. So to comfortably achieve this combo, Swain wants to stay roughly 700 to 800 units away from his opponent, as it not only allows him to land his EW combo super easily, but it's also just a safe distance for a ranged champion to be at so as not to get engaged on by any melee attacker. However, if you place a line of scrimmage at that distance, you will never be able to obtain the full burst damage of Death's Hand, which requires you to be at practically melee range to land all 5 bolts on a single target. Conversely, if you want to get the full burst of Death's Hand, it makes landing Never Move much more difficult. Regardless of which option you take, you lose a considerable chunk of guaranteed pressure. In response, Swain's most common purchase is Rylai's, which when used in conjunction with Demonic Ascension, allows him to stick to people much more easily, therefore prolonging the duration of his ultimate as well as making it easier to land Never Move even when casting up close. But that disconnect between his abilities will always remain there, making him feel uncomfortable to play. Champions who feel good to play are usually because their all-in combo is an extension of their neutral combo. An example of a champion with a neutral and all-in rotation that plays very nicely off one another would be Syndra. Syndra's normal play is to poke enemies from a distance with Q and W, trying to set up as many dark spheres on the map as possible. She can then fish for her all-in opportunity by using Scatter the Weak, and when she deems it necessary, a simple press of her ultimate will hopefully finish them off. From a positional perspective, she stays exactly where she wants to be, even for someone who does go in melee range like Azir. Azir's neutral game consists of area control, poking enemies with his soldiers from a safe distance away. If he decides to engage with Shurima Shuffle, though he does go in melee, his ultimate pushes enemies a distance away from him, re-establishing that line of scrimmage for him to safely attack again. By comparison, half of Swain's kit is almost exclusively neutral focused, while the other half of his kit is almost exclusively all-in focused, and while technically you can still use them together, it either becomes difficult to do so, or one part becomes less efficient. It would be the same as if instead of going Shocking Orb, Xerath's E became Pantheon Shield Vault, a fantastic ability nonetheless, but in the context of Xerath's kit, he would much rather have an ability that can be used from the safety of being a full screen away. A suggestion made by multiple people is that one way in which you can somewhat alleviate this range versus melee disparity is by giving Swain the ability to prematurely draw the Never Move back, as in you don't have to wait for it to travel a full distance. While that would be a welcome quality of life change for the guy, it also makes Never Move extremely difficult to play against. The single biggest counterplay with pick tools like Morgana Q, Blitzcrank Q, etc. is that you can stand behind something to neutralize the threat of it. But with Swain's Never Move traveling through enemies, you essentially have a Diet Morgana Q that can strike through enemies, since all you have to do is wait until the missile's on top of the person you want to lock down and recast the immediately to guarantee a route every time. It would be too good in that sense. Swain's greatest strength is his continuous damage, reminiscent of Karthus and Aurelion Sol in that sense, but typically you'll find more people playing those champs instead of Swain. In fact, I think Aurelion Sol does Swain's job better than him because the former can exert continuous pressure and area control without having to be right next to the enemy team. And the reason I'm stressing the whole problem with having to go in is because Swain is a mage who performs best when face tanking the entire enemy team, yet he lacks any semblance of meaningful resilience to actually survive their pressure. For reference, Vladimir is another battle mage who likes to get right up in everyone's face, but not only does he possess a lot more immediate restoration with this empowered Q, he also has 2 seconds of untargetability to prevent you from bursting him while buying time for Hemoplague to finish you off, and in the late game Vlad's more of a burst mage in all honesty. As for Karthus also wants to get smack dab in the middle of the action, but unlike Swain, Karthus can still exert pressure while dead, and on most occasions, let's be real, he wants to be dead, since he can then make use of Requiem, an ability you would normally want to cast far away from enemy champions, right next to them. In his defense, Swain can stack up HP over time with Ravenous Flock. By late game, you can reasonably expect to have about 400 to 500 more health from this passive, not to mention he typically builds AP bruiser items like Rylai's, Liandry's, Sonya's, what have you, and like I said earlier, Demonic Ascension can restore hundreds of HP per second, especially when draining multiple enemy champions, so he's not entirely without durability. But compared to the untargetability of Vladimir or the incentive to intend feed on Karthus, Swain's a far cry from your usual Juggernaut raid bosses. Moreover, with both this damage and regeneration being gradually applied instead of all at once up front, it can make him feel much less impactful than you want it to be. Demonic Ascension can last forever, but it's balanced around the possibility of it, meaning it doesn't have the same base strength as most other big battle mage ultimates like Rumble, Victor, and Vladimir. Death's Hand can deal a ton of damage, but only if you land all 5 bolts on the same target. Getting hit by just 2 or 3 is much weaker than getting hit by a full Rumble Q in the face, or Victor Death Ray, or Rise EQ. Overall, Swain's a very slow burn character for someone who has to play very all-in. If he had a playstyle like Anivia, where he tries to establish control of the battlefield without necessarily going headfirst into the fray, that would be more applicable to a slow and steady champion. This unintuitive playstyle combined with parts of his kit contradicting each other make him a pretty inconsistent champion both in concept and practice, who doesn't particularly excel in anything despite having the potential to exert a substantial amount of influence in a game. This causes him to get beaten out by almost every type of champion in the game in some way, shape, or form. Swain loses to artillery mages due to having one of the shortest effective ranges in the game. He loses to burst mages due to having much less immediate upfront impact as them, therefore getting out-traded. He loses to juggernauts in an all-in confrontation as they likely have much more durability than him while having equal DPS to boot. He loses to assassins who can get in, blow him up quickly, then get out, or kite him out until his ultimate goes away. And he loses to skirmishers who can chainsaw him faster than he can burn them. Realistically, the only time Swain can outstat check someone is if he's fed, but by that logic, anyone wins when they're fed. On that note, League is the most burst and mobility heavy it's ever been, so a champion with very little immediate upfront damage like Swain with 3 out of 4 of his abilities being easily avoidable by just stepping out of the way doesn't come off as a very optimal choice. This is why there's a non-zero chance you'll find Swain being played top, mid, ADC, and support, but people wouldn't consider him a staple in any of those roles. He has a bit of everything, but not enough of anything to really stand out. If you're looking for someone who can burn enemies, you got plenty of options. Brand, Rumble, Zyra, Cassiopeia, any of the artillery mages if they go Blackfire and the Andres, what have you. If you want someone who can control space really well, tons of champions have the same AoE pressure that he does. If you're looking for easy lockdown, again, you're not exactly strapped for choices. If you want to play a champion with a giant circle of an ultimate, Fiddlestick's Crowstorm lacks the regen component, but it does far more damage and can appear out of nowhere, while Nico and Kennen have CC. As it stands, Swain just doesn't have enough. The problem is, if he gets enough, he becomes too good because he turns from a jack of all trades to a master of all. Remember, he has a bunch of versatile tools, so if you give him a lot of one thing, then he gets that one thing plus all those extra tools on top of it. They tried to experiment with his power budget by shifting things around, choosing which parts of his kit should have more equity and whatnot. Since getting relaunched in 8.2, he received 2 more significant gameplay adjustments, one in 9.14 and another in 12.8. Now he's getting a third one scheduled to come out very soon, if not it's already out by the time we see this. Personally speaking, I think Old Swain felt a lot better to play. That version was mostly geared towards neutral instead of an awkward hybrid between a poke mage, control mage, catch mage, and all-in mage. His Q was poke and control, his W was control, his E was poke, and his ultimate was also mostly poke and control, being a toggle ability. Now in the context of today, Old Swain wouldn't be much better in light of the burst and mobility meta directly countering a playstyle like that, but at least from an experiential standpoint, I definitely think Old Swain felt more intuitive and had a clearer picture than any of New Swain's iterations. We'll just have to hope that whatever Riot's cooking out for the 2024 rework finally gives him an identity to call his own, or gives him a more cohesive toolkit whose abilities can actually play into each other without loss of efficiency. Again, not sure when you'll see this video, probably late August, early September I'd imagine, but assuming the rework is out by then, we should have our answer. What do you guys think about Swain? Do you agree with my points, or do you think it's something else affecting his popularity? You're welcome to share in the comments. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @VarsFerm, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.